I want to welcome you to our program today. I'm Anissa Mitchell with PMD Alliance, and we're going to be talking about food as medicine today. Before we get started, I want to invite you to open up your chat box and give us a shout out. Let us know where you're joining us from. And that's where you can ask your questions today. This is going to be interactive because we're not only going to learn a little bit, but we're also going to see some demonstration of a couple of recipes that you should have received in an email if you pre-registered. And if not, then you will get an email and follow up today that will have the recipes attached so that you can enjoy those. So with us today is Dr. Erin Presant. She is a movement disorder specialist in California, but she's also certified through the Culinary Medicine Specialty Board as a culinary medicine specialist, which is a new field in medicine that intersects traditional medicine and public health. And she's the founder of the Medicine of Yum, which I love that name. And she educates people on culinary medicine, healthy lifestyle choices through her teaching kitchens virtually and community outreach. So we will share the link to her website. You can go on there. She's got blogs on there. But it's a very interesting perspective. And I love the fact that we have a movement disorder specialist that also specializes in culinary medicine, because I know so many people have such an interest in a lot of questions about what should they be eating, what would make them feel better, what are things to avoid, and how do we do this and manage things like protein intake. So we're very excited to have an expert in both fields with us with Dr. Presant. So Dr. Presant, thank you for joining us, and I'm going to pass this off to you.
All right, great. Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here and to see all these faces. And I'm looking in the chat and I see all these different places you guys are from. So that's amazing. It's wonderful to have you here. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. And I'm just going to go ahead and start off first by doing a little talk. I made slides because I know sometimes it's easier for people to follow along with slides. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen before we get into the cooking part. And we'll go ahead and do the talk. And if you have questions along the way, you can certainly put them in the chat. I know somebody will be monitoring that, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. So everybody seeing my screen, I hope. And so the question that I always get, right, from so many patients is, what can I do with my diet that will help my Parkinson's disease? So we're going to try to answer that for you today. But let's get back to, why would your diet even matter to your brain? Because a lot of times we don't think about that, right? We think, oh, the diet will make a difference in my gut. It'll make a difference in my heart, but maybe not my brain. But that's not true. A consistently poor diet can actually lead to an increase of inflammation throughout your body. And then what happens is that turns into a chronic inflammatory state. And that can create poor sleep and stress and depression. And these are all things that you kind of are already dealing with Parkinson's too. So, we don't need to add on to that. So your brain is susceptible to this inflammation, which is really important to remember. Some studies in terms of inflammation and Parkinson's disease have shown that there may be increased inflammation in the gut of people with Parkinson's disease, and it might be a possible place where the Parkinson's is starting and maybe coming from. There could be this change in the gut microbiome, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, that might lead to the inflammation that we see in the guts of people with Parkinson's disease. Now, what is that gut microbiome? So we've got the good bugs in our gastrointestinal system, the bad bugs, and the gut bugs. So actually, the gut bugs are the good bugs. We want those bugs there. So our gut actually has 100 trillion different bacteria, and about 1/3 of that bacteria is the same among the population, and then 2/3 is unique to each person, depending on genetics, depending on where you live, depending on what your diet's like. So what we're really looking for, instead of focusing on one type of bacteria that we all want to have in our gut, we really want to see a diverse and balanced gut biome. So that means the more plants and more fiber that you eat, the more diverse gut biome you're going to have. Now, again, that's always going to differ based on where you live and what food you're eating. And we're going to get down to the nitty gritty of the food too in a minute, but this is kind of just general. And we have seen that there is a difference in the microbiome of people with Parkinson's disease versus those without Parkinson's disease. So this is an area of study for a lot of researchers right now. And it's a very interesting area in that we might be able to find some sort of marker that might predispose you to Parkinson's disease, or something in the gut that might be creating the Parkinson's disease, so that we can change that. So while we don't have that answer yet, it's certainly an interesting area. But remember that what happens in the gut doesn't stay in the gut, okay? And what the gut biome and what happens in the gut has an impact on our whole central nervous system and the rest of our body. So this was I'm just sharing with you this quick diagram. This is kind of where this interest began. There was a study that talked about people who had this vagus nerve cut had a lower incidence of Parkinson's disease. So we're talking about the gut microbiome. There's an imbalance, which creates inflammation, which creates more alpha-synuclein. The alpha-synuclein is that protein that clumps up in the brain that we see in Parkinson's. And so there's a thought that maybe this alpha-synuclein travels along this vagus nerve and up into the brain. It's an interesting thought, and more studies are being done to look at that. So we've, like I said, we're going to keep studying this so we can know how the gut biome relates to PD and how it can help us to diagnose Parkinson's earlier and maybe come up with new therapies as well. So with all that information, is there a current recommendation on what you can do? Should you be taking prebiotics? Now, prebiotics are essentially fiber that comes from plant sources of food and feeds that gut bacteria. But there's no specific prebiotic you should be taking. Probiotics, again, there's no specific recommendation on probiotics that you should be taking for Parkinson's disease. You may have other reasons to be taking probiotics, and if your doctor tells you to do that, then you should. What about a more specific diet? Well, we're going to get into that and talk a little bit about that. But in general, if this is like your takeaway right now, a diverse and healthy diet is how you can alter your gut and keep your gut healthy. So you want to limit those processed foods. You want to eat more plant-based foods, whole grains, nuts, seeds, beans, lentils, all those good things, legumes, and get more focused on those plant-based foods. All right, so happy gut with broccoli and apples, which is lots of fiber and lots of plant-based food. But I know that eating in Parkinson's disease can already be complicated. So you're sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, now I'm supposed to do something else. I already take medication like every 2 or 3 hours or whatever you're taking. How can I possibly deal with eating with, you may have lost your sense of smell, so food might not taste as good. You may have a little bit of difficulty swallowing. You may just not be interested in food from any apathy or depression that you might have, causing a lack of appetite. And then constipation, which is one of the biggest non-motor symptoms in Parkinson's disease, is a huge reason that people may not feel like eating. So again, I definitely understand that following a specific diet might seem like too much. This was an interesting study that came out about a Parkinson's disease diet, which isn't really a diet. It was just people that were following or ate more foods with flavonoids, higher flavonoids. So what are flavonoids? Flavonoids are powerful antioxidants that help to fight inflammation. And in previous studies, they've been shown to maybe have a protective effect on the brain. So in this study that was just published in January, it showed that people who had a higher consumption of flavonoids had better rates of survival after they had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. So where can you get flavonoids? Well, mainly in the study, they looked at people who consumed berries, oranges, teas, both black and green, apples, and red wine. The red wine, I always get this question about alcohol and is it okay and should I be drinking it or not? I would never tell somebody who doesn't drink to start drinking in order to get those flavonoids. And if you are drinking, you want to limit that significantly. The data out there on heart health and cancer and alcohol's contribution to that, there's a lot of mixed messaging. So I would just be careful and limit the alcohol. And certainly if your doctor tells you it's not safe with the medications you take, don't start drinking. It's definitely not worth that. So getting back to, is there a PD specific diet? The short answer is, well, not exactly. However, along with that last study and previous studies, it's shown that this Mediterranean type of diet is healthiest for overall mortality. Now, what's the Mediterranean diet? Well, I think you guys probably all recognize these food pyramids. This is kind of the old school one here on the left, which shows our fats and oils at the top and meats and fruits and vegetables and rice and alternatives at the bottom. But you can see that this one was kind of based on like carbohydrates, and it says only 2 to 3 servings of whole grain of your rice and alternatives should be whole grains per day, and then fruits and vegetables, and then meats, and then fats and oil. So the Mediterranean diet pyramid is a little bit different, okay? And what I love about it is that the bottom is based on movement and community and mindfulness of what you're eating, which I think is so important for all of us. And then the next row up is fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. So we want the base of our diet to be these whole foods that we're getting from plant sources that increase the fiber. It will help with the constipation, help with many of the symptoms that you're already dealing with in Parkinson's. And then the next one up is in at least in America, we don't eat a lot of seafood. We eat a lot less than in other cultures. And really that fish and seafood has been shown to be very brain healthy. So we want to try to increase our fish and seafood. And then it's the poultry, eggs, cheese, and yogurt, and then meats and sweets. It does show the wine over there. And again, I wouldn't start drinking if you don't drink. And if you do, limit that, drink in moderation for sure. Now, some people may be looking at this and being like, I don't like Mediterranean food. I don't want to eat a Mediterranean diet. It just doesn't taste good to me. Well, and this is why I put like Mediterranean diet in a quote, because you can be from different places in the world and still consume a diet that is plant forward and healthy. So this one, for instance, is the African heritage diet. So if you're from Africa, you may eat different grains and fruits and greens than they do in Mediterranean, and that's fine. Or you may be from Asia and you have different plant sources of protein that you're going to eat, and again, different fruits, different greens. So you can make it your own, right? You can make it your own flavors. It doesn't have to be Mediterranean. So you don't have to think, I have to eat falafel and hummus all the time. You can make it your own. The Latin American diet pyramid is going to look a little bit different too. But the base of all this, one, is mindfulness, community, movement, and then whole foods, okay? The fruits, vegetables, grains, no matter what they are, they're healthy. I mean, if you are from, here we go, Latin America, we have coconut, we have more beans, we have papaya. Now, you may not live somewhere where you get papaya, you may, but that's still a whole fruit, and you can make it your own. So use those flavors that you like. To make this diet your own. Let's see. All right. So this Mediterranean diet, I'm going to keep it in quotes, okay? We're talking about 2 to 3 cups of vegetables per day. Again, whatever vegetables you like. 2 cups per week of legumes. So these can be lentils, peas, beans, chickpeas, peanuts. Did you know okra is a legume? So if you're in the South or maybe you're somewhere else and you really like okra, go for it. You just want to stay away from that fried okra. Then 1 to 1.5 cups a day of fruits. Again, you want to make the fruits whatever you like to eat. All of them have fiber. You don't want them soaking in syrup. So fresh fruits are great. A quarter cup per day of nuts, 1.5 cups a day of cereal or whole grain. So cereal, we're not talking about Fruity Pebbles here. We're talking about like oats, whole oats, whole wheat cereals that don't have added sugars. You're getting a lot of fiber out of those. Keep in mind that, corn is a whole grain. So if you like those tortillas, try to stay away from the flour tortillas and go for those corn tortillas. That's a whole grain. So you're getting a serving of whole grain with that. Try to transition from white rice to brown rice. And that will be a source of whole grain. Sometimes there is confusion about what is a whole grain, or what products have a whole grain in them. Oftentimes they will have this stamp on them. You will see it on the packaging. So when you're looking at your bread, if you're buying wheat bread, if the first ingredient is wheat, then it's not a whole grain. You want it to say whole wheat or whole grain, okay? And usually it'll have this symbol on it, okay? So don't get fooled by the wheat bread that's not actually a whole grain. On this Mediterranean type diet, we want to try to increase our seafood intake and eat 2 4-ounce servings of fish per week, 3 to 4 ounces of meat per day, and that's it. So we want to try to use leaner pieces of meat, poultry, and leaner cuts of pork and beef if you're going to eat that. If you're going to consume beef, you want to try to get higher quality beef. Grass-fed beef is better because it shifts that omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, and we want higher omega-3 fatty acids. So try to go with that grass-fed beef if you're going to do that. But we do want to limit the pork and the beef as well. You want to do less than 1 cup of dairy per day. And I'm going to get into dairy specifically with PD in just a minute. And if you're going to consume dairy, you want to try to consume more fermented dairy. And then you want to try to choose plant-based fats over animal fats. So that means if a fat is solid at room temperature, like butter or coconut oil, it's going to be a saturated fat. Coconut oil is a saturated fat, and you do want to limit that. There had been some talk about it being good for the brain, but there's very limited evidence, and there's more and more evidence that it actually is worse for your LDL cholesterol, your bad cholesterol. So you do want to be careful about your coconut oil intake. And then the alcohol we've already talked about. So I like this graphic in terms of nutrition in Parkinson's disease because it kind of shows where we want to head to. So on this side, we've got all these good things in these whole foods that we were just talking about, omega-3 fatty acids, where we see that in fatty fish and some of the nuts and seeds that we eat, vegetables, fruit. And these are all things that we find this in soy products. We find these in certain vegetables, tea, caffeine. This is found in red wine. And then these things are kind of neutral. So these are still being studied, and we need to have more evidence about that. And then in terms of being harmful, we've got the dairy products on that side. So let's talk a little bit about that. There have been some studies showing an association between high levels of dairy consumption and Parkinson's disease. There's no evidence, though, that it's like a direct cause of Parkinson's disease, though. So don't worry. But what you want to do is try to increase the fermented dairy products versus unfermented dairy products if you're going to consume dairy. So what would be a fermented dairy product? Like yogurt, for instance, and you would want to go with low-fat yogurt. Kefir, which is a drink, a yogurt type of drink. Some cheeses and things like that. So you want to limit the just plain dairy that you're drinking. Another reason to limit dairy is that it will also increase your constipation. So if you're struggling with that with Parkinson's disease, dairy will definitely increase constipation. So the takeaway really is just limit your dairy consumption. Maybe try switching to a plant-based milk. If you're having a tablespoon of half and half or milk in your coffee in the morning, that's probably fine. But don't sit down and have a glass of milk with your meal. So at this point, everyone's like, I can't handle it. All right. So let's focus on what you're doing right. Okay. If you ate some vegetables today, give yourself a pat on the back. If you ate a piece of fruit with your breakfast, great. Where you might be somewhere where it's already lunchtime, or you might be thinking about dinner already. Can you eat a home cooked meal? Did you sit down at the table with somebody else and eat? These are all great things. It helps you to digest well. You enjoy your food more, and you're more mindful about what you're eating. Did you take a walk today, or did you participate in an exercise class, either virtually or in person? These are all things you are doing right. So focus on those before you get too overwhelmed about all these other things that are happening. Give yourself a pat on the back and let go of that guilt. So if you did eat, a bag of chips with lunch, that's okay. Maybe have an apple with dinner, and don't continue to think about it too much. Sometimes we need to make substitutions. Depending on where you live, you might have a harder time getting fresh vegetables at certain times of the year, fresh fruit. So remember that frozen vegetables are always good to have on hand. You don't lose any of the nutritional content from the frozen vegetables. So if you like frozen peas or frozen green beans, that's fine. It's really more about the way you cook them. So if you boil them, you lose some of the nutrients out of them that way. So you can saute them or steam them really quickly. Canned vegetables are less ideal because oftentimes they have added sodium. So you do want to be careful about that. You can freeze fresh vegetables, or you can prepare them into sauces, and that'll help keep them for longer. Again, with the fresh fruit, you want to eat that skin with them. It gives you a lot more fiber and will help with the constipation, and you get a lot of the nutrients from that skin as well. Frozen fruits are fine too, but you do want to be careful of those fruits in a jar and a can, because oftentimes they're soaking in like a sugary syrup, and you're losing a lot of the nutrients there. Dried fruits are good as well, but sometimes they add a lot of sugars or preservatives to that, so be careful there. And then don't forget about those fresh herbs. They can be used for lots of flavor to enhance food, and they can be frozen if you need to do that, because they do go bad quickly. Think about where you can eat a whole grain. What kind of bread are you buying? Can you substitute that whole wheat bread rather than white bread, or that wheat bread that's not really whole wheat? Maybe add or buy breads with added nuts and seeds. Again, the corn tortilla is a great and easy way to shift out that flour tortilla and put in a whole grain. You just want to concentrate on limiting the processed foods and substitute with whole foods. So when you go into the grocery store, try to shop the perimeter of the store. That's where the freshest foods will be, and limit those processed foods, which are usually in the middle of the store as we go up and down the aisles. Mindful eating is super important. So stress eating is not mindful eating. And there's a lot to be stressed about in the world. And then you're dealing with a health condition. There's so much going on. And so one of the most important ways to not stress eat is don't buy the stuff that you like to eat when you stress eat, right? So if you like cookies, maybe don't buy them. Or if you like chips, maybe don't buy them. Make substitutions. Instead of chips, can you get salted nuts? Instead of cookies, can you make a snack, or can you have some dark chocolate or some fruit with honey? And I'm gonna make here today a snack that, if you're kind of one of those sweet snackers, is great to have on hand, and really healthy and full of fiber. So try to savor your meal when you're eating. Maybe sit down with whomever you live with, and or FaceTime or Zoom with a family or friend when you have a meal. And when we're sitting down with people, it enhances that community and enhances our mindfulness of what we're eating. So we're doing less of the sit in front of the TV and just eat, or driving, or whatever we're doing, which we do a lot of in America, and try to make eating each meal a thing where you are enjoying what you're eating, you're paying attention to what you're putting into your body. Don't eat if you're bored. If you're bored, I like to tell people, get up and move, walk around. And remember that you might be thirsty. A lot of times we mistake our hunger for thirst, and a lot of us don't drink enough throughout the day anyway. So get up and get yourself some water, or sparkling water if you like that. Get yourself something to drink and see if you're still hungry, 10 minutes later. Okay, protein I'm going to address specifically because I know it can be an issue in Parkinson's disease with the medication. So I know that sometimes people are losing weight or having difficulty eating enough. So protein can be really important. The carbidopa levodopa, if you're taking that, it can interact with the protein. So you might notice that your carbidopa levodopa doesn't work as well if you eat it at the same time of protein. That's fine. A lot of people will eat either an hour or two before they have to take their medication, or an hour or two after, in order to avoid this interaction. If you're taking your medication very frequently through the day, then you may need to do what we call a protein flip diet, where you kind of eat more of your protein in the evening time when you need to be less mobile. Protein can come from many sources. So if you're looking for more protein, remember plant sources can have a lot of protein. Nuts, seeds, beans, lentils, legumes, quinoa, spinach, and other leafy greens have protein in them. Peas are a great source of protein. Eggs and yogurt, if you're going to go that route. These are just some examples of the plant-based foods that have protein in them. And here's some more protein. We know that the animal sources have the highest and quickest amount of protein that we can get. But again, we have chickpeas and lentils and kale and kidney beans and buckwheat and quinoa. And remember that wherever you're from, if there's a grain that you eat that's not listed here, that's okay. And that may also have some protein in it. So keep in mind that this is not an exhaustive list, and it may not include something that you're used to eating, which is fine as well. So what should I cook? I say make it easy, right? We don't need an Instagram or Pinterest ready meal every time we sit down. Use a crock pot or an Instapot. Soups are great. They're easy to eat. They're easy to make. They're easy to freeze. So you can pop them out of the freezer and have them at other times. Casseroles are good. Frittatas. I love frittatas because you can throw all these veggies in there and protein. Roasted vegetables. You can make a big pan of them at the beginning of the week and keep them for different things throughout the week. You can put them on salads, reuse them for soups. So a lot of different things. Smoothies, which I'm going to show you one today, which is a great snack or breakfast if you like that. Overnight oats, a lot of people like those. Those are easy to make the night before. They're in your fridge. You pop them out in the morning and eat them. So I don't believe that healthy and delicious has to be complicated. It can be very simple. And I think sometimes it's better when it's simple. So some ideas, especially with Parkinson's disease, prep vegetables sometime when you're feeling really good, like when you're feeling very mobile, when your medication is working, you can use chopping vegetables as a form of physical therapy maybe. Sit down, if you're going to be chopping a lot, you can sit down at your table or sit down wherever and chop. You can use a food processor, or there are vegetable choppers that can help with just one push of a button. You can think about ways the dinner can be turned into breakfast or lunch the next day. Again, like those roasted vegetables, for instance. Cook larger portions. So sometimes I'll cook a large portion of quinoa at the beginning of the week. And even if we don't get through it in the week, you can freeze quinoa and bring it out at a moment's notice and just reheat it. And use those things for the next couple days. You can buy the parboiled rice, brown rice, that is frozen at grocery stores. It comes in a bag. A lot of times it's frozen, like at Trader Joe's, if you have that, or other grocery stores. And it has a little bit less from a nutritional standpoint, but it's still better than a white rice. So you can easily make that, because sometimes brown rice can take a long time to cook. So remember, perfection isn't the goal here. You want to make baby steps and move your nutrition forward in a very simple and easy, sustainable way for you. But what you eat really does matter. So think about that. When you are putting something into your body, when you're eating something, it can affect your body just as your medications do. So there's no specific Parkinson's disease diet, but what we do know is that the more plant-based, the more whole foods that you're consuming, the better for your gut biome. So those berries, like in that study that was just published, the more flavonoids you can get, the berries, the oranges, the teas, the all of those fruits and vegetables that you can put into your body, the better, and the whole grains as well. So limit going down up and down those aisles in the grocery store. Try to shop the perimeter of the grocery store. Make it your own though. You don't have to be stuck to falafel and hummus if that's what you think of when you think of a Mediterranean diet. You can eat so many different things that you can make your own and make them healthy as well. Do your best and just take baby steps. When we go on diets, it really implies that it's something short term and something that may be difficult to maintain. And what we want is just more of a lifestyle. You want to make slow changes, slow substitutions so that you can continue to do that. And that's what's really important. So a small change is still a change, and recognize that for yourself and give yourself a pat on the back every day when you do make little changes. All right, so this is, I am teaching culinary medicine through Medicine of Young. That's my company, and that's the website at the top, and my email's there at the bottom. And I'm gonna go ahead and just stop sharing, and I can get to the cooking part. So if you guys got the recipes, there were two, and I'm going to go ahead and start with the coconut date balls. And the reason I chose these recipes, they're not full meals, which would be difficult to complete at this amount of time anyway. And what I like about these recipes is that they're quick, and they can, if you are having difficult time swallowing or you need softer foods, both of these can be helpful in that situation too. But they also taste good, so if you don't need that stuff, you can eat them as well. These coconut date balls we eat in my house all the time. My kids love them, and they're always a crowd pleaser. So here we go. So we have the dates. I don't know if you guys can see my other camera here. I had one with the food, but I have a bowl of dates here. And the recipe does say to soften the dates. You don't necessarily need to. Oh, there it is. But I did. So I poured warm water over them, just let them sit. But I've also done this when I've forgotten to do that, and they work just fine. So I just take the bowl of dates, and I have a food processor here. You don't have to have a huge food processor. It could be something small to do this, and you can just make smaller portions. And then I have my pecans, which are a great source of fiber and omega-3 fatty acids and all these good things for our body. We'll go ahead and put those in the food processor as well. All right, and what we're going to do is just turn that food processor on. We're looking for a little bit of stickiness. Actually, I also put, I know the recipe doesn't say this, but I like to put 1 tablespoon of unsweetened coconut flakes in with that. And then we roll it in coconut later too, but I'll go ahead and put that in there. And as I talked about, you don't want to eat too much coconut, but a little bit's good. And this is kind of a treat. So make sure you're getting the unsweetened coconut. All right. Yep. Hold on to your ears here. I'm just going to turn on the food processor. Right. So what you get is, and you can process it as much or as little as you want. So if you want chunkier, a chunkier texture, you don't have to process it quite as much. I'm going to show you on my camera here. You get this kind of dough-like consistency, so you can easily form it into a ball. And you can see I have bigger chunks here. I don't mind the nuts being a bigger chunk. And then you just take it and roll it in the coconut like this. And you have this delicious snack ball there that you can keep in your fridge for 3 to 5 days. And if you make a whole batch of them, you can easily keep them in there to snack on. Now, what's great about these also in Parkinson's, again, the nuts are wonderful. The texture is soft. And if you have a swallowing problem, you can process them more so you don't have those pieces of nuts that you might choke on. But also the dates. The dates are what sweeten these, and they will help you with constipation as well. So,
and Dr. Presant, I don't mean to cut you off, but we've had some questions, and I think this is a perfect time to explain a little bit of the difference between the sugars that are naturally in the dates versus white sugar. And if you could also speak to like the kind of fat and calories that you would find in this versus some other snacky foods that might not be as healthy.
Great questions. I love those. So you're absolutely right. The dates are very high in sugar, but they are high in natural sugars. So what does that mean? Well, in a date, you're getting these natural sugars that haven't been added, but that are there in the fruit. And what is also coming with those natural sugars is fiber. So you're getting a lot of fiber. So when we eat a large amount of sugar, let's say something with a lot of refined sugar in it, there's oftentimes not a lot of fiber or other things that are going in there. So your blood glucose goes up very high, very fast, and then it drops very high, very fast. When you're eating, let's say an apple or a date, we have fiber and other nutrients in there. And so the sugar does go up, but because of those other things in there, it doesn't drop off as quickly. So you don't get these huge spikes in sugar. Now, you're absolutely right. These do have sugar in them and fat and calories from the nuts. However, they will be a more satisfying snack than, let's say, a cookie that you pull out of a chocolate chip cookie that you pull out of a package, because there is fiber and there is more nutrients. So your body doesn't feel like it needs to keep consuming these. Now, in each of these day balls, they are going to be higher in calories. So they're about 100 calories, depending on how big you make them. Okay, so you want to, for a snack, maybe eat 2 of them, but they are sweet. So usually 2 is about good. So it is about watching your portions too. You can't just, just because something is natural, let's say an apple, you don't want to sit down and eat like 8 apples. You probably won't feel good, and that's a lot of sugar, and it'll be a lot for your body. So portion size portion control is important as we think about eating, and the mindfulness is part of that. But again, these are, if you're into snack or sweet snacks, these are really great. They satisfy that sweet craving, and they're full of fiber and nuts, and they taste great. I hope that answered some of those questions. Just gonna wipe my hands off here.
It did. And while you're wiping your hand off, we had an earlier question in regards to fiber. And they wanted to know if someone has gastroparesis or slow motility, what is recommended in this case? So in this case, I guess they're asking, is fiber good if you have delayed emptying of the stomach?
Right. Yeah, so that can get complicated for sure. With gastroparesis, basically smaller meals are better. You want to limit the amount you're eating. The fiber and the fiber has more to do with kind of past the gastro side of things. So like a smaller snack like this would be better than something larger. So the fiber is good to help with some of that motility or some of the getting things moving through your gut, but it won't help with the speed of the emptying of the stomach necessarily. Yeah.
And in regards to the coconut, they wanted to know that you'd mentioned earlier that a lot of coconut oil isn't good. So they're wanting to know, like, using coconut in something like this, if there's a difference between like the raw coconut meat versus the coconut oil.
Right. Well, it's a good point, right? So the problem with the coconut oil and coconut in general, no, there's not I'm going to say this coconut is just basically raw coconut meat. It doesn't have any added sugar or anything, but it still will contain that saturated fat that the coconut has. So in terms of a snack, we're using very little here. And sometimes that fat does help to make us more full. So that's one of the reasons that it's in this recipe. And it will be better for you than other things that you find on the shelf from a package. Okay. The saturated fats in coconut oil and coconut have been found to actually increase your LDL cholesterol as much as, or if not more than, butter. So if you're going to cook with coconut oil, make sure you're substituting butter. If you're going to cook with coconut oil, don't use butter and coconut oil, right? So really, preferably, you would want to use a plant-based oil, a non-tropical plant-based oil like olive oil. There have been some great studies on brain health and olive oil, so I tend to use olive oil pretty much for everything. And coconut oil is really reserved for something very special. So there's not a lot of difference between the saturated fat in coconut meat here and the coconut oil, but the saturated fat that is here is very little and would provide kind of that mouthfeel, what we call mouthfeel. So it makes you feel very satisfied with what you're eating. So between the fiber and the nuts and the sweetness and a little bit of that fat that's there, you're going to be happy with this snack. Very, very satisfied, right? All right. So the next recipe is a smoothie, and I thought that this was good because some people, again, may have a difficult time with eating certain things. So this is nice and smooth and sweet without any added sugars. So here it's kind of defrosting because I took it out earlier, but if you have any old bananas that are getting brown, what I love to do is I chop them up and I put them in a bag and put them in my freezer. And when they're like nice and sweet, instead of making banana bread or whatever else you might do with them, throwing them out, this is a great way to have a sweet snack around. So this is one frozen banana. We're going to go ahead and put that in the blender. And you can just actually make a banana ice cream with this, with frozen banana. And you can just put that in the blender. We call it banana swirl in my house. And we just, my daughter loves to put cinnamon in it. We just put cinnamon and banana in the blender and blend it up. And it's the consistency of ice cream. And it satisfies that sweet craving that you may have for a snack. Or you can turn it into the smoothie. So we have one banana and I have 1 tablespoon of peanut butter. Okay. And when you're buying peanut butter, you want to make sure that you're getting the unsalted and unsweetened. So all natural peanut butter. You really don't need any additives in peanut butter. And we've got our legume there. And then here, I'm showing you how to use a smoothie with substituting in that plant-based milk. You don't need yogurt. You don't need the dairy product. You can use any plant-based milk you want. You could even use soy. We like macadamia nut milk. Just make sure whatever you're buying, almond milk, oat milk, is unsweetened. So you don't want to get the sweetened stuff because that, again, tends to have a lot of sugars in it and it can be a little bit hidden. Sometimes we don't look at that. So we're going to go ahead and put in a 1/4 cup of the macadamia nut milk here. I'm going to go ahead and turn the blender on here. So hold your ears. All right. Now that wasn't so bad. If you are using, again, my bananas had defrosted a little bit because they've been sitting on the counter, but if you are using really frozen bananas, it will make this loud noise. It sounds like it's going to break your blender, but it won't, and they'll eventually settle down. Get my cup out here. And so it's really delicious. If you like these flavors, you could throw in some cinnamon. You could throw in well, I like cinnamon. We like pumpkin pie spice too here in our house. And this is a really great snack. It's filling. It has the peanut butter in there. It has the sweetness if you like something sweet. It can be frozen. I have made the smoothie and frozen it in like a jar in my freezer and then just defrosted it when somebody wanted something. You could also freeze it in little ice cubes, so you have smaller portions if you'd like. But again, I like this recipe because it's simple. You like 3 ingredients. You can use up that old fruit. You can get some peanut butter in there, which is great. It has legumes, and some unsweetened plant-based milk, which is great. So you don't have to be using the dairy product. This will have some protein in it. So if you do have that problem with the carbidopa, levodopa, and protein interaction, you won't want to take your medications with something like this, but it could be a good snack for in between those medication doses. So that's it. See, I love peanut butter though. It's like, you could use other nut butters if you don't like peanut butter too. Almond butter, mixed nut butter. There are a couple stores that carry that. So whatever you like. All right.
So we do have questions for you.
Great.
I know somebody just wrote in, hemp milk is a new player for plant-based diets. Gosh, we have a lot of options now. Used to just be soy milk,
Right.
and almond milk and oat milk and hemp milk and macadamia milk, all these different options. So can you speak a little bit more, because I think there was an earlier question too about milk and whole milk versus skim milk, and is there a difference in the risk factors related to skim versus whole?
Right. Yeah, I mean, in terms of Parkinson's disease, the short answer of that is no, we haven't seen that. It's still being studied. I believe that studies were done using low-fat dairy products. The thought is that there's actually something in the dairy, so it doesn't have to do with the fat content of the dairy. I would say if you're going to consume dairy products, I would consume the lower fat. I would consume, if you can afford organic, that would be the one place I would recommend organics. If you can't afford or don't want to buy organic vegetables or fruits, that's probably or the evidence is really kind of out there on that. But in terms of dairy products, I would go more organic with that. There's a number of different theories about what might be contributing to Parkinson's disease in the dairy products. It hasn't been nailed down. And again, it's not that drinking dairy causes Parkinson's disease. There's a little bit of an association. And so if you can back off on the dairy, that's what I'd recommend.
And someone had commented about the Mediterranean diet. Actually, we've had a couple of comments about the meat that's in the Mediterranean diet and all of the plant-based parts of it. So can you talk a little bit about it being as a balance and what types of meats? Because another person said it looks like they eat a lot of meat and a lot of dairy, and we're saying like, let's reduce the dairy. So can you go back over a little bit about how those are balanced out?
Sure. Yeah, of course. So when we're talking about that kind of diet, we're really looking at when we're, I should have had the graphic. And so do you guys, most of you guys probably remember that plate that the government put out, I don't know, in the 80s or 90s. And it showed like, protein should be half the plate. And then like a little quarter of the plate should be vegetables and a little quarter should be fruit. So what we want to do is really like protein shift that. So what we want with the Mediterranean diet is really having half that plate being fruits and vegetables. Okay, so half of the plate being fruits and vegetables, rather than what we're talking about in terms of a traditional protein like meat, fish, poultry, dairy. And then we replace that cup of milk that they used to have on the side of that plate with water, preferably. Okay, so that's really what we're talking about. And in those pyramids, really that base is trying to show that big base should be whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. In terms of meats, what we want is more seafood. So substituting out other food or meats like red meat and chicken, turkey for seafood if you can. And then if you're going to choose to eat meat, doing things like low fat chicken, which is, more like lower fat cuts. So less chicken thighs, less chicken legs, more chicken breasts, or if you are going to use chicken thighs, you want to cut off the fat before using them. If you're going to consume beef, you want to make that more of a treat than something that you consume regularly. So maybe make that steak that you're going to have, or the hamburger, or something you do once a week. If you're doing it multiple times a week, or once a month, if you're already doing it once a week. And buying the grass-fed, higher quality beef, if you are going to do that, is going to improve the nutritional value of the meat. So really on those diets, I guess maybe it looked like there was a lot of meat, but really the consumption of meat is a lot less. And what we want to try to do is continue to back off on that and look for other sources of protein rather than these like traditional sources of protein that we had thought of.
So there's been some talk about the keto diet being beneficial for Parkinson's. What is your thoughts about the keto diet?
Yeah. So there was a study a couple of years ago that showed that it might have been helpful in some of the non-motor symptoms of Parkinson's disease. It was a small study, and I think that we need more evidence for that. My problem with the keto diet in general is that it's a diet. It's hard to maintain. And I just think that that unless there's a specific reason, so like the ketogenic diet has been used specifically to treat epilepsy, and there is good evidence to support that. So if you're using it for that reason, then that needs to be followed. But otherwise, it's a very difficult diet to follow. Most people don't continue on it. And I think that just trying to change your lifestyle and really making your diet more plant forward is probably an easier way to go than trying to double down on a keto diet. I haven't seen any further evidence that is super convincing in Parkinson's disease. So maybe we'll see it, but the literature is still not quite there yet.
And there was a question here about why low fats. I've been hearing our brains need fat. So can you talk a little bit about the different types of fats again?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when we're talking about low fat, we're talking about low saturated fat, right? So saturated fat is the fat that we hear about increasing heart disease. It's also not great for our brains. If our LDL, or that bad cholesterol, is higher, it's worse for our brains. So when we're talking about low fats, that's usually what we're talking about, is that saturated fat. We want those good fats. So what are the good fats? The good fats are like omega-3 fatty acids, which are found in nuts and seeds and fatty fish like salmon, tuna, those things. So those fats are actually very, very important. And you're absolutely right. The low fat diet that was so popular back in the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, I remember like eating like non-fat cheese, and it was like disgusting. It would like melt and be like plastic on my bread or whatever. We do not want to do that. The low fat diet actually caused people to turn more towards really unhealthy carbohydrates and made people really unhealthy. So we're not looking at a low fat diet. But when we are talking about fats, we're talking about up-leveling our fats. So olive oil, and again, those fats from the nuts and seeds and avocados, those types of fats are what we're talking about, not a low fat diet at all.
Earlier, you were talking about inflammation. Mm-hmm. And so we had a question about whether you can lower chronic, or if you can reverse chronic inflammation with the change in diet.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So absolutely. Even small changes to your diet, limiting that processed food and limiting sugars, has been shown to reverse some of the inflammation that is seen throughout the body. So it's never too late to start, and any changes you make are helpful, for sure.
And for snacking, we had a question earlier about where is popcorn in the diet? Is it in or out?
Great question. I love popcorn. Popcorn's a great snack if you are doing, if you're popping it yourself. So let's stay away from the microwavable popcorn that comes in the bag, and you can use it yourself. You can pop it yourself in a pot with olive oil, or you can even put it in your own paper bag and pop it in your microwave, and then you can season it however you like. So popcorn is a whole grain, and so it's a great snack to have if you can do it.
And someone wanted to know if you could explain a little bit more about what a culinary medicine specialist is.
Sure. So yeah, culinary medicine is, like Anissa had said, it's a newer field of medicine, kind of off the lifestyle medicine branch, where there's more of a focus on how we're treating our bodies and what we're doing in our lives that are either helping or hurting our health conditions. So culinary medicine specifically focuses on teaching people about their food and then how to cook, because there is evidence that shows the more we cook at home and the more we know what to do with our food, the healthier we are. So culinary medicine is kind of that branch of medicine where it's you're working with your doctor on your diet for your specific health condition. And you can also learn how to use the different foods that your doctor might be talking about.
And I know that there's been some questions or comments throughout today's program. I know everybody has like their own specific dietary needs. Some people might have other coexisting medical issues, diabetes. Somebody had, I think, kidney stones or whatever, that certainly there's going to be some modifications in their diets specific to their needs that can't necessarily be generalized. So if somebody's having specific issues, who would you recommend if they don't have someone like you to see to get some additional guidance on, taking a look at the whole picture of, not just their Parkinson's and issues related to that, but also other coexisting conditions?
Yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely. There are going to be other health conditions that you have to consider, not just Parkinson's, of course, and that can get tricky. So a lot of doctors, unfortunately, and this is where culinary medicine kind of comes in, a lot of doctors aren't trained in specifically in nutrition. Actually, in medical school, it's only now starting to become something that is integrated into the curriculum. So hopefully, as we move forward, there will be more physicians that are better trained in nutrition and how to use your food to help your body. But right now, let's say you have kidney stones or you have diabetes, you should be able to get a referral to a dietitian or somebody that maybe works specifically with that clinic that if you go to a diabetes clinic, maybe they have a dietitian that works for them, where you might be able to talk more about that. You can look up culinary medicine specialists. There aren't a whole lot of us throughout the United States, but there's a website. If you type in certified culinary medicine specialists, and there's a map of people that you might be able to find. But a lot of times, if you do have a specific health condition, again, like diabetes, or you have kidney stones, there might be a specific dietitian that your physician works with and may be able to refer you to. I believe Medicare will also pay for a dietitian or dietary consult for diabetes and certain other health conditions. So that might be something to look into as well.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for giving us your time, sharing with us some of your recipes. And for those of you who didn't get them beforehand because you might have registered a little bit later, you will get them in a follow-up email after today's program. It is also recorded, and we invite you to come back and review those. The slides will be made available. If you want to capture some of the links that were dropped here in the discussion through the chat, if you go over to, in your chat box, the 3 little dots and click there, you can save your chat. We dropped in Dr. Presant's Medicine of Yum website again, and you're welcome to check that out. Again, she's got some blogs, and you can interact with her on there and have a consult. So if that's something that you're interested in and you want to learn a little bit more about how she might be able to help you, then that is available. So Dr. Presant, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your experience with us and those yummy recipes. I'm hungry now. And I want to invite all of our folks that are here to give you our wave of gratitude and just thank you for that expertise and time. So we want to thank you, and I want to thank everyone for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you again. Take care.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.